Hello internet friends, my name is Catherine and I'm the human being Christian Couture, and today we're going to carry on with the color wheel, and one step at a time, one color at a time, we're getting there. So today basically what we're going to be working on is adding the black to the red of our color wheel. Eventually my hope is to be able to recreate all of this with the opposite colors, so we will be able to do a comparison of all those. So let's get into today's video. Okay, so welcome back to Color Wheel Monday. So today we are adding black to our red. So we have a 1% stock solution of a fire engine red right here. If you remember correctly, we're going to be working our way through the entire color wheel. And we have also here a 1%, oop-de-doo. Okay, bye-bye. A 1% depth of shade, like 1% stock solution of true black to add to our red. So we have here 6 mason jars. They're filled with 300 milliliters of tap water. There is no acid currently in it. We're going to be adding 10 grams mini skeins of fingering stroll from Nitpick. So in our jar, we will have the 1% stock solution for all of them for our red, because we will be comparing the different depth of shades added with the black. So we'll have 10 milliliters in each of those jars of the fire engine red. And then here when we're going to be adding, we're going to be adding from the lowest depth of shade possible to 1%. So we'll have 0.05 here, 0.10, 0.25, 0.50, 0.75, and 1% depth of shade of the true black here, just so we can see how impactful the black is on the red, because it's a way for us to work our color theory. So we're going to be adding the there we go. And you might be asking, why would I only use like 1% for the red and not use other percentage? Basically, it's because we want to compare it to our um, like control. Well, I think it's not. There's not enough water. Are you adding water? So we have a control that I made first before starting this series, and it is at 1% depth of shade, so that way we can compare. Because usually when you're working with your stock solution, you want to start with your 1% stock solution, so that way you have a good idea of what you're playing with, basically. Because that way you can always add more, but you cannot take away from the color. So if you're going to be adding black, you need to understand how impactful the addition of that black is to the final color you're going to have. So it's just an exercise to, oh, you're being very rude to me. True black. Okay, so well, I'll have to add. So we want to understand the relationship all the colors we'll have together. Also, we need to understand which color are more potent than others. So this is why we do this exercise that way. Okay, so this is what 2.5. Okay, 0.5 now. And like, I can guarantee you at the end we're going to have black in those jar, but black with a tiny tint, no, of like red and warmth. Because sometimes that's what you want. You want a dark black, but with warmth in it. So maybe just adding the red is what you want. Okay. And now I just. Okay, of course I did. I made a mess again. And we know that black will be overpowering. We just need to understand how overpowering it is. It's like blue. We know that blue likes to take control of all situation. However, you know, you don't know how it will impact the rest. Okay, let's add our colors. Our yarn. Diamond. And don't forget that our yarn will look darker wet than it's going to be when it is dry. So this is also something we need to remember and not freak out necessarily. Because we're still going to have some red in there. Okay, let's try to move you a tiny bit. So there's still no acid. We're going to be adding the acid a little later. And this one is almost a burgundy. So if we were to add a little bit of blue in this one, we would definitely get almost like a wine color, which is nice. And this is why we do those exercises, right? To understand what can be done. We could definitely have done the tissue test as well. However, the tissue test is not always reliable when it comes to the final color because tissue paper towel are usually much lighter. Like they're actually almost a true white, where your yarn is not necessarily a true white. Your yarn is usually a little bit more creamy, so that's why it's not as reliable. And also, there's some colors will truly show their true colors, pun intended. Um, sorry, that was a bad pun. When you add the acid, and you don't always have your acid in your jars when you're doing a tissue test, and some colors will honestly, truly show off when you're adding the heat. So this is why it's not always like the most reliable technique, but it will give you an idea of what's going on. So we're going to be adding this in the double boiler. Let's add this, and it will give you. Uh, I don't know how good you'll be able to see, but okay. So let's add the water. Okay, so that's good. Let's turn on the heat right away to get it started. Okay, so as mentioned, we don't have the acid right now. We're going to be adding it a little bit later. However, like I've mentioned in a few videos, this technique takes a little bit longer than if we had 6 different pan, um, simply because it takes longer for the water to reach the point, the 95 Celsius that we want this to reach, because we don't want a boiling water, but we want it hot enough. So it's basically going to, the time will actually double for this. So normally you would be only like cooking it for half an hour, but with this double boiler, sometimes it can take up to an hour to get the temperature right and get it all good. So we're going to let this cook for however long it needs. We'll be adding the acid at some point in the process, and after that we're going to let it cool down. We're going to wash it, let it dry overnight, and I will see you in a bit. All right, bye. And here you can see that we have a clear dye bath, which is fantastic with both red and black. And now we're going to wash it out. So we all know red, they have a tendency to to bleed. I will repeat this every single video. Red does sometimes bleed. Same thing with pink, and anything that will have a red pigment will most likely bleed. So you need to keep this in mind. It is not a failure if you have some pink tint in your dye bath, or if you have some pink tint in the soak wash after you're doing the dyeing. If it's like actively bleeding and it looks like a murder scene, now you have to wonder what's going on. However, if it's just like this most subtle pink, just make sure that people are aware that this might happen and that you recommend a color catcher. So we're going to let this dry overnight, and I will show you the final result in a second. And here's the final result for the adding black portion of the color wheel. Zoe, I love you, but what stop. Okay, and you can see how different it is. And for the adding the black to the red, you can see that it is still quite dark. However, there is hints of purple, and that's sometimes because black technically compounds of everything. Hey, Zoe. I know, I love you too. Okay, compounds of everything. So you will usually end up with a purple tint. So with the sun, you can actually see the purple tint. So it won't be necessarily a true black while you're adding this, and you will be able to see this. It will almost come down to a wine color. So if you're going into berries, you could also add a tint, like a little bit of blue, to be more in those colors, but only adding the black will definitely create those deep shade of red, purplish red. So this is definitely something that you can work with. And I think next time, that's what we're going to do at some point. Once we've complete the color wheel, maybe we'll be playing with complementary colors and things like that, and see how this goes. If you have ideas of what you would like to see in the color theory and in color wheel things, like, just let me know in the comment below, or send me an email, and I will see what I can do with the time we have. So because I'm very curious about color theory and how everything impacts everything, so I am more than happy to experiment with the colors. So if you like the video, let me know, and please consider sharing, liking, and subscribing, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye!